well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. Glad you're with me today. Joining me on the program, Rob Doar from the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus. We're going to be talking about the omnibus gun control bill that the caucus says would essentially repeal the Second Amendment. Unfortunately, that's not even the only gun control bill that is on the move in the state of Minnesota. The question is whether or not the narrow Democratic majorities are going to pass. I shouldn't even say whether or not they're going to pass gun control laws. I think at this point, we'll talk about it with Rob Doar, it might be a matter of what the narrow majorities in Minnesota are going to approve. Yeah, and none of it, unfortunately, I think is going to be good for gun owners, but we'll get to that. Well, right now, as a matter of fact, take a look and a listen to our conversation with Rob Doar, the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus. Rob Doar, thank you so much, sir, for coming on the program. It's good talking with you today, and thank you for all of your work and the work of the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus this year.
Oh, my pleasure. Great to be here, Cam, and thank you for your work and what you do and getting the word out and mobilizing the troops.
Well, I appreciate it. And yeah, there's definitely a need for mobilization right now in Minnesota. We were talking about this off air. 2019, where I live in Virginia, Democrats took complete control of state government for the first time in, I think, 30 years and immediately decided we're going to ban guns. And that didn't go well for them. You know, they passed about a half dozen gun control laws, but in 2021, Republicans swept the elections. They took back control of the House. They took control of all statewide offices. And I hope that is the future of Minnesota right now, because you all are dealing with the Democrats in complete control of government problem right now. And they're not being shy or modest about what they want to do, right? Let's talk about some of the bills that have been introduced this year, including 1723, which the caucus says would in essence, just destroy the Second Amendment completely.
Yeah, I mean, they're running the full gambit. It's been 10 years since we've had our last Democrat control, but the Minnesota is a little bit weird. I imagine much like Virginia, where there are Democrats there but they're out in, outside of the urban areas that are pro Second Amendment, but they vote Democrat for labor reasons or other things like that. And that was a significant part of the 10 years ago when they had the Democrat majority. Now we've got a very, very metrocentric. It's basically the big cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Duluth, Rochester, kind of running the show. They've done everything from bills that would force you to keep your firearms unloaded and locked up at home, making them useless for self-defense, charging you with a crime if you fail to report a firearm lost or stolen within 48 hours of it happening, even if maybe it's in your cabin or you're on vacation, you don't even know. Red flag laws, universal background checks, gun owner registration to the Senate file, which you just mentioned, which essentially repeals the Second Amendment. Registration, licensing, mandatory training, mandatory mental health screening, and a physical screening in order to get your firearms license. I mean, there's literally not a gun control provision in there that isn't inside that bill.
That's great. What about sensitive places, Rob? Because I know that we've seen a lot of Bruin response bills, in blue states from New York, Maryland, Massachusetts, California, Hawaii, where they're saying, all right, fine. If we can't decide who gets to carry, well, then we're not going to let anybody carry anywhere. Have we seen anything like that introduced in Minnesota this year?
Well, yeah, and so that is part of the some of the legislation that's been introduced is banning guns in sensitive places like all government buildings. Currently in Minnesota, it's kind of flipped the other way. A government building can't restrict the lawful carry of permit holders. There's a couple of exemptions: schools, government courthouses where a court order is in effect, jails. But beyond that, every city hall, every county building, you're allowed to carry if you've got a permit to carry. They want to remove that. They also want to make it a crime to carry at the Capitol, something that we enjoy doing. There was literally a state legislator a couple years ago mugged on the way in between the Capitol and one of the office buildings, and yet they want to ban us from being able to carry on the Capitol grounds.
Well, and that speaks to, I think, one of the other dynamics at work here in Minnesota is that violent crime is rising, particularly in the Twin Cities, right? And it's not gotten any better since 2020. There are, and so there's this weird dynamic, Rob, on the left where a lot of Democrats are fully committed to, these gun control propositions. Well, at the same time, they complain about over policing. They complain about over incarceration. They say we need to be smart on crime. We need to do things like, community gun violence intervention programs, which I'm frankly in favor of. But how are the Democrats in Minnesota squaring this circle of, well, gosh, we need to worry about over policing. Hey, let's put more nonviolent possessory crimes on the books and carve it out of a fundamental right to keep and bear arms.
Well, yeah, which is also hilarious because the universal background check bill that they had when they introduced it said that police officers could deny people their right to carry based on police contact. And so that just flies in their whole narrative against, this over policing and everything. But some of the things that we advocate for is really strong enforcement of our current laws. We have a mandatory minimum in Minnesota where on a first offense, if you commit a violent felony and you've got a firearm, that's a 3-year mandatory minimum. And if you commit it again, it's a 5-year mandatory minimum. Time and time again, our sentencing guideline commissions has identified the single most undercharged and dropped charge is felon in possession of a firearm because of those mandatory minimum sentences. So they're not even getting serious about prosecuting the crimes we have. Then we've got on our bills, it's a misdemeanor if you engage in a straw purchase. So that's knowingly selling a firearm to somebody who is a prohibited person, buying it on their behalf. A couple of years ago, the Hennepin County attorney, Hennepin County is the seat of government for Minneapolis. That's the largest county, largest city in the state. He said that the reason why he doesn't prosecute straw buyers is because the penalty is too low. Yet every time we've offered a bill to increase that penalty to incentivize prosecution of these people who are trafficking firearms to gang members and violent persons, the Democrats have shot it down in favor of their push for gun control, which, of course, as everybody watching this knows, only adds hurdles to law-abiding gun owners, doesn't do anything to slow down the illegal trafficking of firearms.
Yeah, well, and that is the dynamic here, right? I mean, as you say, the criminals aren't touched by these laws, particularly if they're not being enforced. So even a felon in possession law isn't going to have much of an impact if it's not actually being charged. Meanwhile, again, the attempt to, place these new restrictions on legal gun owners, making them jump through all of these hoops and hurdles in order to exercise the Second Amendment right, and criminalizing their conduct if they don't, right? If you're in possession of a firearm without a permit under Senate Bill 1723, that is a criminal offense. And I have a feeling, Rob, that while a lot of rural locations might not enforce that all that strictly, in Ramsey County and Hennepin County, I don't know, something tells me that concealed carry holders, that folks who want to try to obey the law might end up facing a tougher prosecution than even somebody committing a violent crime with an illegally carried gun.
Well, and because we don't have constitutional carry, they've got a nice convenient list of 400,000 Minnesotans who they know own guns. And if all of a sudden that list doesn't match up with their list of who should license their firearms, I think we can all see where that's going.
Yeah. So what bills are on the move right now? Obviously, you're concerned about them all. Is 1723? Do you think that was kind of thrown up as a smokescreen? Like, let's put it all out there, and then if we don't pass that, well, we can say, look, we did these moderate, reasonable steps, like red flag laws or universal background checks or things of that nature.
Yeah, and I think that is a very likely strategy. Right now, our Senate has a 1-vote majority for the Democrats, so we only need one single vote out of 67. 34 of the Democrats there, and 2 of those Democrats are out in Greater Minnesota, and both of them are being very quiet about their support for these bills. So we do have the ability to stop these bills. Minnesota is often used as kind of a testing ground for what's reasonable in other parts of the country. So even if you're not in Minnesota, this could have a very strong impact on you because of Minnesota's very strong pro-gun history and their pro-gun Greater Minnesota Democrats. We could be viewed as kind of the poster child for other gun control in other states. But what we're really looking at is these 2 senators. Now, what I think this egregious bill that was introduced by Senator Marty, 1723, that it could be an opportunity for them to say, well, I don't support those extreme bills like that one. I'm in favor of common sense gun control, like background checks and red flag laws. So it's very, very possible that bill was introduced just to get us focused on that one and screeching about that one, so that we maybe aren't paying as close of attention to the ones that are going to advance, which are just as egregious. I mean, the red flag laws, letting somebody who you're in a significant romantic or sexual relationship with, anybody who you've ever been married to, anybody who you've ever resided with, be able to get one of these secret orders to take your guns. I mean, that is just fundamentally unconstitutional and a violation of due process. But they want us to maybe pay more attention to that, to the shiny object, rather than while they try to advance these other bills through.
Yeah, and thankfully, I think you guys can walk and chew gum at the same time, and you can pay attention to all of these bills. And it's interesting that you say these two Democrats from outside of the greater Minneapolis area are the hinge here, because one of the things that I have been so frustrated by, Rob, is the fact that I think that there is a progressive argument against gun control, and you've got folks on the left who are making this argument. But it seems like a lot of Democrats are just willing to stick their fingers in their ears and say, la, 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 I can't hear you, because they don't want to actually address the contradiction, the fundamental contradiction between more gun control and police reform. So are they just going to just brush that under the rug? Are they just not even going to talk about it? Is this something that the DFL in Minnesota is not willing to have a debate on? Because I know that you and your colleagues have testified, to these ends when you've been, expressing your opposition to some of these bills. What has been the reaction when you've brought up the progressive argument against gun control?
We have had some good feedback, and I think we're very intentional to. When we have testimony for these bills, we're very intentional about bringing people up who are progressives, who are liberals, but they are pro-gun and they oppose these bills. We're intentional about that because, it's easy to dismiss me as somebody who's, conservative libertarian. I go up there and I tell them what's wrong with their bill. They get to dismiss me. But when somebody from their own team comes up and starts poking them about using the same verbiage that they like, we one of our testifiers, Sarah Cade, who's fantastic, one of her lines upset some of the conservatives on the committee, but she said that, in reference to this, police officers get to deny permits based on police contact. She says that, I don't know what the intent of this bill is, but I know what officer discretion is code for. And that triggered some of the Republicans, but you could see some of the Democrats squirm in their seat because they're using their own arguments against them in these bills. Will it make a difference? I don't know. I think that the party infrastructure is very strong here. There's very much a hive mentality, a herd mentality. It's very rare for people to go off, but I can tell you there will be bipartisan opposition to these bills in the Minnesota House, and we just need that one senator in the Senate who could be the backstop for this.
So what bills are on the move right now? What are you telling members to be making contact on right now?
Yeah, so right now we're running ads in Greater Minnesota in targeted districts, particularly at these senators. And what we're most concerned about, what we feel like is going to have the most likelihood of advancing, is the red flag laws, the universal background checks, which is registering every gun owner in the state, the safe storage mandate, and or I call it unsafe storage because an unloaded gun is useless for self-defense, and then the blame the victim bill, which criminalizes the failure to report a firearm lost or stolen. Those ones are probably going to be the ones that have the most juice. But at an anti-gun rally just last week, the wife of our governor just said that they're going to ban the sale of firearms to anybody under 21. And they're also going to pass a few other bills that we haven't even seen yet. So it's a wide open field. We've got a couple more weeks before our deadline. We're kind of the cutoff for new bills. But then we've got omnibus bills here. And that's every year we see this where all of a sudden these zombie bills that we thought were dead, or bills that never saw the light of day before, all of a sudden get crammed to an omnibus bill that's 800 pages long and then gets voted on. So those ones are the ones that are making the most noise, that I personally think have the most likelihood of advancing, at least off of the House floor. But really anything goes, and we could use all the help we can get.
What are you seeing from gun owners and Second Amendment advocates in the state? Have they responded? Do they recognize the threat? Is there a tendency to think, well, Bruin will save us, so I don't need to get involved? What's the attitude of the gun owners that you've been talking to anyway?
We've had a good response. Our membership has grown, which has been great. There are people who are really, really wanting to engage in the fight, which is great. We've also seen people saying, time to leave this hellhole of a state. Okay. I'm not a defeatist that way. I'd rather go down fighting. Than let them win. Then we have people who are saying, "Oh, what's the point? None of it matters. Broom will save us." I'll point out here that we just lost a lawsuit where we sued the state fair for prohibiting people from being able to carry firearms at state fairgrounds in direct violation of Minnesota state law. It was like crystal clear, but the judge just created, even after Brune, created a presumption that it was a sensitive space. So even though the state law said it didn't go there, even though the Brune decision still applied, the judge still did that analysis. And I'll just say it costs $100,000 to $200,000 to bring a lawsuit up through the state court, then the Court of Appeals, and then all the way up to the Supreme Court. So imagine doing that for every single one of these bills. I'd rather defeat them while we can here than count on Brune saving us.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is always better to defeat a bad bill than to try to challenge a bad law in court. And Rob, listen, again, thank you so much for joining me. You're at the state capitol right now. And I know that you guys are, again, paying very close attention to what's going on. MN Gun Owners Caucus on Twitter. How else can folks find you?
Yeah, so gunowners.mn. If nothing else, sign up for our email list just so we can keep you updated on what's going on. Then at Gun Owners MN on Twitter, and then Facebook. If you just Google MN Gun Owners Caucus, you'll find us there.
All right. Well, listen, thanks again for all that you do. Thanks for the work that the caucus is doing, and I look forward to talking to you again very soon.
My pleasure. Thanks so much, Cam.
Thanks, Rob. I appreciate Rob joining me on the program. Appreciate all of the work that the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus and its members are doing there in the state. And we'll be paying close attention to what's going on with that, all of that legislation here in the weeks ahead. Right now, let's turn our attention to today's Armed Citizen story, our good deed of the day, and our recidivist report. Start there with a story of a couple of armed robbers who managed to get a sweetheart of a plea deal. This is from the Lewiston Tribune out of Iowa. Two Pullman residents, they say, accused of robbing a Garfield man at gunpoint, have been sent to prison. But not very long, as it turns out. 35-year-old Gabrielle Hernandez and her ex-husband, 37-year-old Roy Valdez, each sentenced to just a year behind bars in Whitman County Superior Court last Friday. Whitman County Judge Gary Libby ordered their sentences to include drug treatment, and after their release from prison, they must be placed on probation. It was back in September of last year. Deputies at the Whitman County Sheriff's Office dispatched to a home in Garfield after a report of a resident being robbed at gunpoint. Witnesses identified Hernandez and Valdez as the suspects in that armed robbery. According to police, the two apparently had been sought out by a drug dealer to collect money from a fallen-through drug deal. They were told to go to a residence there in Garfield to get a refund of $400 from a man who said that he could obtain drugs but didn't hold up his end of the deal. While going to collect the cash, Valdez, who is a convicted felon, brought along a .357 pistol to the home. The two threatened the Garfield man and were seen by witnesses taking several $100s of tools and other items from the home. As they were then driving back to their home, they were arrested by officers of the Pullman Police Department. Stolen items and the pistol were recovered by police while conducting a vehicle search. Hernandez and Valdez taken to jail. They've been in the jail since September of 2022 on charges of first-degree robbery, theft of a firearm, unlawful possession of a firearm. Bail was set for $200,000 each or $20,000 cash, and apparently they stayed behind bars for the last couple of months. Before their sentencing, Valdez pleaded guilty to felony residential burglary as well as being a felon in possession of a firearm. Hernandez, meanwhile, pleaded guilty to felony residential burglary and 2 additional charges of car theft. 2 separate cases. Hernandez also pleaded guilty to stealing 2 vehicles. She was caught with the stolen cars in Pullman last spring. And again, despite the laundry list of offenses, including violent offenses, including felon in possession of a firearm, Hernandez and Valdez both got a slap on the wrist. A year behind bars. And given the fact that they'll get credit for the time that they've already spent behind bars awaiting trial, odds are that Hernandez and Valdez will very soon be released back into society. But I'm sure that, since they're being monitored on probation, everything will be just fine, right? Today's Armed Citizen story from Seattle, Washington, where a smoke shop employee able to protect himself after an armed robber burst in Monday afternoon and opened fire, wounding the store clerk. Thankfully, the store clerk was armed as well and returned fire, striking and killing the would-be armed robber. Police say that members of the community, neighbors basically, heard the gunshots, came running, saw the injured smoke shop employee, and began applying first aid. They were pulling off their belts and using them as tourniquets. That smoke shop employee taken to a local hospital with what's described as non-life-threatening injuries. Again, the would-be robber succumbing to his injuries there at the scene, according to police. The investigation continues, but at this point, pretty clear this is an act of self-defense, right? When you fire back after being shot, yeah, you definitely have the right to protect your life under those circumstances. So we'll keep our eyes on any updates to this story. But honestly, I got to tell you, I don't know that we're going to get any. I talked about this at Bearing Arms yesterday. Some of even the local media coverage of armed citizen stories really seems to be downplayed these days. But we will keep looking for any updates to this particular defensive gun use out of Seattle. Finally today, our good deed of the day, in the right place at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. An anonymous stranger in Oklahoma City who was able to help put out a fire in a couple's backyard over the weekend. Yeah, there's the headline from KWTV. Holy smokes! Couple says Good Samaritan helped put fire out with feet and then vanished. I have to tell you, I was getting a little deja vu as I was reading this story. I'll fill you in as to why that is the case. But this was in Oklahoma City. April and Brian Hooley said they heard a bang over the weekend, and then they saw smoke and flames in their backyard. April Hooley said it was spreading so fast, coming up towards the patio area. Her husband Brian says it was coming up towards the fence too. You never know what could have happened. Well, the family starts, yelling for help. They grab a fire extinguisher to try to put out the flames in the backyard, but they say almost as quickly as the smoke appeared, so did this anonymous stranger. Brian Hooley says he was probably just driving by because there's a main road behind us and he must have seen the smoke. So surveillance, ring footage from the doorbell shows the man quickly pulling into the driveway of the home, getting out of his vehicle. He goes to the backyard. His pastor, meanwhile, is on the phone calling 911. The Hoolies say the man quickly got in the way of the blaze, started using his feet to basically just, stomp down the flames. The couple said the man vanished as quickly as he showed up, leaving before emergency crews even arrived. But the family said that this could have been so much worse were he not there. Brian Hooley says just for a guy to pull into the neighborhood, just driving by to see that smoke, it was incredible, sort of like he's done this before. And now the couple on social media trying to reconnect with this guy. They say, we just want to be able to thank him formally and maybe like to buy him a pair of new shoes too. Hopefully they get the chance to connect with that anonymous Good Samaritan, again, in the right place at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. And the reason why I say this was deja vu is because when I was a kid growing up in Oklahoma City, now I'm not going to lay this on me, by the way. This is all on my older brother and his JD friends. But when I was maybe 9 years old, my brother and his friends took an M80, which were legal to sell in Oklahoma at the time at fireworks stands, set it on right up next to the fence in his buddy Davy's backyard, lit the fuse. The M80 goes off, does not blow up the fence, made a really big, loud noise, obviously, but didn't blow a hole in the fence. We thought everything was fine. I was just there as a bystander, just a poor innocent babe, if you will. But then a couple of minutes later, we noticed smoke rising from the neighbor's backyard. Yeah. My brother and his buddies had set the neighbor's yard on fire, which resulted in a Keystone Cops-like parade of tweens and adolescents running around the backyard, trying to find a garden hose, attach the garden hose, get the hose on, and holding the hose over the fence there in the hopes of extinguishing the blaze in the neighbor's backyard, which did happen, by the way. Fire was put out, no harm done except to the backsides of some of the older kids there who were responsible for that. So, fireworks, dry backyards in Oklahoma, Not a good mix, but I'm glad that anonymous stranger was around to stop that blaze from getting any worse. Now, that is going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company. I want to thank you for being a part of the program as always. Make sure you're checking out the website today. We've got a lot of stuff going on. Permitless carry on the move in Florida. Campus carry could get a final vote in the state house today. State Senate has already passed that bill. They've made some minor tweaks, but I think this is going to be the big vote for campus carry. We'll get that covered at Bearing Arms. And, of course, I would encourage you to become a VIP member as well. All you have to do, go to bearingarms.com/subscribe, use the promo code GUNRIGHTS, and you can get a significant savings on your VIP membership. As our way of saying thanks for showing your support for the independent pro-Second Amendment journalism we do, we're going to give you exclusive content, news stories, and analysis you won't find anywhere else, because your support does matter, and it really does make a difference. So thank you again. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Until then, be well, be safe, and be free.